So where would you like me to start? I mean, I've been doing this for nearly 30 years now.
Yeah, go ahead. You graduated from college and you went into, were you a graduate assistant? And, we don't have to go into the history of the light bulb or anything, but just kind of briefly take everybody through it. So, because not everybody has the same path.
Okay. All right, here we go. Well, I graduated from Northern Kentucky University, worked my way through school, really wasn't much of an athlete, to be honest with you. I mean, I thought I was, but I just didn't have the background or the whatever to take me through that process when I was younger. Plus, when I graduated from high school, I was about 5'8", 130 pounds. So it wasn't real conducive to being a great jock at the big school I was at. But I went –
Being a great jockey.
That's about right. That's about right. Back then, I could have been. But I graduated. I got an opportunity to go to Wilmington College, and I always loved sports, played a lot of sports in youth and stuff like that, but had an opportunity. I got a job, an internship at Wilmington College, and I went up there in the sports information PR office for a year, and the women's basketball coach, asked me to help out a little bit, and I was looking for a hobby, and that's really how it started. We were, to be honest with you, having a beer one night, and at small schools, you can get involved in a lot of different stuff because the budgets are small and they're always looking for help. Well, how it really all started for me is I did that for a year and kind of never dreamed I was going to be a full-time coach. Well, the following spring, my wife and I, we were in Florida and we're having a little vacation, and I went to a used books. I do a lot of vintage stuff. I went to a used bookstore and I found John Wooden's book, They Call Me Coach. And it was a little paperback. I bought it for $0.25. I still have it over on my shelf right here. And I spent the rest of that vacation under a canopy with a notepad, a pen, and a highlighter. And I was just taking notes. And I mean, for that quarter, my whole life changed that moment. I knew from then on I was going to be a coach. I didn't know how it was going to work out, and I got into this backwards completely. But that was the spark right there. The messaging, his values, the impact that you could have on young people, it all hit me like a ton of bricks. So I went on. I stayed another 5 years at Wilmington, had a great experience there. And then I got a full-time gig at Northern Kentucky University, and a great coach. Jerry is a great coach, great start. But then I went with Nancy Winstow at NKU. She won a couple of national champions. We won one in 2000 when I was there. She's one of the best coaches in the country, bar none. And that was where I feel like I got my master's degree in coaching. Winstow was so tough that you had to be prepared. You had to know your stuff. And I really had to raise my level in every way. And that's where my confidence really came into play as a coach. And then I was with her a record 6 years. And anybody who worked with Nancy, and I tease her all the time, you make it 6 years with her, man, you deserve – you can work for anybody. And
that's right.
But from there, about the fifth happiest day of my life is I took a head coaching job at Thomas More. Okay, and the other four happiest days when my four children were born. But as a matter of fact, my wife had just delivered our third daughter, and I went down a mile and a half down the street from the hospital and took a job at Thomas More to be a head coach, making $12,000 in the job I already had, right? And so, you talk about that was a long drive back to that hospital to tell her what had happened, but I promised her it would work out in the end. I would make it back, and, we hustled and got raises, and so we did make it back. But that was just a great experience. As a head coach, think you know everything. Think you got it all down. You got all the answers. And then you get to that next seat over, and you find out you don't know near as much as you thought you did. We won our first game. We beat Calvin, who was a really good program, our first game. Next game, we lost to Capital, and we ended up starting 2-5. And I was thinking, what have I got myself into? Well, we stuck with it, keep growing, and we built one of the best Division III programs in the country there at Thomas More, and it was a great experience. Loved it.
So how many years were you there at Thomas More, Coach?
Seven.
Okay.
Yeah, and made 5 straight NCAAs, but our kids were doing great with academics, just great people, everything you want to be a part of. And then I got a call. New coach was taking over at Xavier. They were at the height of their run, and kind of to be like the bench coach, to help out with the X's O's, to be the experienced guy on that staff. And never really wanted to be a Division I coach. It was never a goal of mine, but you also don't have many opportunities. The competitiveness in me was like, well, let's see what it's like up there, let's see what we can do. Well, it was just a tough situation. She inherited a tough situation. I am probably, after she resigned, probably inherited a tougher situation. I don't have any regrets because I worked my butt off. I tried to figure it out. And when push came to shove, it didn't work out, so I didn't beat myself up. I'm not beating myself up over it, but it was a great opportunity, a great learning experience. I probably learned more about myself as a man, as a Christian, those types of things in those tough times that I did in all the good years at NKU and Thomas More and things like that.
Let's talk about that then. Let's talk about what did you learn? What do you think? What are your takeaways? And how many years were you at Xavier?
I was there 8 total, 6 as the head coach.
Okay, 6 as the head coach. And
right.
So let's talk about that transition from, going from the assistant to the head.
Right.
And looking in retrospect, what did you learn and what are your takeaways from that? Just to help, other people that are going to be watching this, because like you came through the SID's office. Not everybody does that. Some come through just being a GA somewhere else, or their dad was a coach, or, however it works out.
Right.
Not everybody has the same path, but we all can learn something from somebody somewhere. And so what are your takeaways from Xavier?
Well, it really boils down to recruiting. You have to get the right players, and everything's got to fit together, right?
Right.
And we just never could get the right pieces at the right time. And then by the time, and I hope this doesn't sound like making excuses or anything like that,
no.
But by the time we got it all to add up, your contract's ticking so fast that it makes it easy if an administration chooses to go in a different direction, to look for something more positive, whatever that looks like.
I hear you.
And so the contract was just racing. We had changed the culture, that the types of people we were bringing in. I had changed some staff members and felt like we were really on the right track, having kids that were Xavier kids. But then like it was just going so fast at the end. And the last 2 big non-conference, we did fine, but the last 2 years in the Big East, we just didn't win enough. And and it just happens. And so it is at that level. It's a business. I appreciate the opportunity everybody there gave me and the great relationships, but it just didn't happen. And then I was fortunate enough from Matt Ballant at Eastern Illinois, who went through a similar situation when he was in Illinois, was looking for a kind of a more experienced coach. And so I was able to go to Eastern Illinois this past year and get into a situation with a culture that kind of fit my personality, right on.
Good.
And so we had a really good year over there. So that made the bounce back a lot more bearable.
Isn't it crazy how fast you go from being the inexperienced coach that's like, oh man, to the experienced coach that someone's looking for. That's you just, because of what you've gone through and the experiences that you've been awarded through this profession. When you're in that grind, it's just like you said, that clock is ticking on your contract, and that pressure, it's a pressure cooker, and you just feel sometimes like you're running on a treadmill and you can't catch it fast enough.
Well, the frustrating part is like in the networking, you don't have 50 opportunities, but you only need one, right? You need one good fit. And so you find out when things go bad who your friends are in a hurry.
Oh, yeah.
And your phone's not ringing. That's exactly right. And so that was an eye opener, because you get all these hundreds of people you've known over the years, but when you don't have anything for them, it was a lot more difficult. But luckily the right guy was there for me, and we've got a good relationship, got a great team. Our kids there are awesome, and so it's been a great experience.
Two of the subjects that kind of come up as we've been talking to a few different guys too, Brian, are two things you mentioned, ironically. Culture being probably one of the biggest things as you move up in the levels, but also, and you didn't mention specifically, but patience, and how like a lot of programs and a lot of, when it becomes a business, there is that lack of patience for what people deem as success. And it might not be, you might be successful in different ways as a coach, and it might not transfer over the win-loss column, right?
Right.
But maybe talk a little bit about that, like how culture affects things, and how like you how you deal with that not as an assistant as opposed to a head coach, and how you can control some of that, and how it's different.
Well, when I say culture, when I think of it, I think of people having similar values. And there's a lot of different ways to skin this cat, right? You can be successful a lot of different ways. So whatever way you're going to do it, I just think it's all got to add up with the way the coach thinks things should be. And so if you bring players and parents and things that doesn't fit that, it's very difficult. And I spent a couple years, to be honest with you, trying to be a dad, trying to teach right from wrong, trying to teach responsibility, getting kids in class on stuff. And I thought I had never experienced that before. And after a while, it became very frustrating. We weren't getting any traction with what we were trying to do. So then that's when I said, we've got to change the way we do business. We've got to bring in different people who match. And so we hired Christian Stephanopoulos, who played for me when I was at Thomas More. So I knew Christian was the families, the kind of people that would relate to the things I was preaching about. And that's when we started making what I thought was our strides in improving the roster and the culture of the program, stuff like that.
How's your culture at where you're at right now? And how does that differ from where you were at Xavier, or is it different? It may not be any different, but just kind of contrast and compare.
It's off the charts. Positive right there. Coach Ballant does a great job. He if you are not what he considers have high character, then he's not going down that path. And so that right off the bat, our kids are great students. They work hard, they're very conscientious. And so then it's so much easier to get the buy-in that you want to have. And so that was – but the big difference is when I was at Xavier, every kid we offered had 10, 15 scholarships. The kids we're recruiting in Eastern Illinois have 1, 2, or 3. So the whole their whole perspective, their whole appreciation of what they have there versus what they expect at different places is completely different. And, we don't have coaches shopping our kids around because you're not getting 12 shots or, 32 minutes and all that nonsense. So there is it's a lot more authentic is the way I would view that right now.
Yeah, the entitlement of some of these young athletes, and then they're street agents, if you will.
Right.
It kind of, I don't want to say corrupts the experience, but it corrupts the experience, I think.
It's not healthy.
It isn't. It's not healthy, and it's good that when you're in a place and you can be able to compare what you had. I'll give you an example. I was in the XFL.
Okay.
It was recently, until April 10th, when they put the kibosh on the whole thing. All those players had an experience in the NFL, some longer than others, right? Some had played 5 years in the NFL, some had played 5 minutes in the NFL, all right? But they were all trying to get back because the XFL didn't pay like the NFL will pay. So they were all, in the experience with the team that I was with, very humble, hard work ethic, and not all of them off the chart, but just had that intentionality of, instead of just making the team, they want to make the team better so that they could shine on film or whatever. So if there was an NFL scout that was watching the game or whatever, sometimes when you're at, and I've coached at those Division I places like an Xavier, where those kids they get self-centered a little bit.
Yeah. And
that's where you got to de-recruit them. So how do you go about de-recruiting those kids that you've recruited them so hard, and then you get them there, and then you got to really de-recruit them into your program? How do you go about doing that?
Well, I think part of my problem is I was pretty honest up front. When we sat in my office, I told him this is how it's going to go. And I'm not good. I don't promise starting jobs or minutes, any of that stuff. And, you talk about earning everything you get and all that kind of stuff. And I think I think that helped a ton, but I think it also weeded out some players. So
Yeah.
your talent level, I think it hurt us there. But the players, I said, I'm not going to be different when you get in 2 years from now than I am when you're sitting here on this couch. And that was the mom and dad or whoever sitting there listening to that. So I try to do that up front. Sometimes I look back and think that was a big mistake. And sometimes you wonder, like, do you sell your soul a little bit to get talented kids or to do certain things? And I just was not willing to do that.
Yeah.
And I went there a certain way, and I knew, I knew it would work out somehow or another, and I was going to do it my way, the right way, or I wasn't going to do it. And, and I can live with that.
Well, and
I feel for you. That's a challenge.
I mentioned that to Steve prior to us talking, Brian, that probably out of everybody that recruited my daughter. So my experience with you is a little different in that, I really appreciated that. That was one of the things about you that I thought you were probably one of the best recruiters. But now I'm probably a little different than a lot of the parents out there, because I was looking for honesty, and so was my daughter. So I don't think you run across that as much in the recruiting process. So I don't think that was a mistake at all from your standpoint. I think that's sticking to that is the thing that makes it easier for you when you get a player to do what, like Steve said, is to de-recruit them or
Right.
program them from all that. Because some of those athletes, I mean, let's be honest, the one thing they sort of like and are attracted to in the recruiting process is the attention that they get. And then when they get to a place, it might not be anything like they ever expected, because they were sold a bill of goods by a coach that was doing, like you said, selling their soul to win games.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And when you get there, you find out. But that same rush of that wanting that attention is what's fueling the transfer market that we have today. And
Yep.
you can just tell what's going on is not healthy. You can tell it's not genuine, but it is a business, and that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, you got to understand the business of it all. Coach, let's talk about, you brought up your Christian faith. Let's talk about a little bit, going in a different direction, how you balance family. You have 4 children, you said?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And family, and the family of having a team, because, we always say our team is a family, our culture of our team is family, but you also have your own personal family, a wife and kids and all that. How do you balance that?
Well, to be honest,
at one time, did you not balance it well? Or
yeah,
I can honestly attest to, I didn't balance it
Right.
well. I looked back at myself and I was like, oh boy.
Yeah. And
I was a pro coach, but I wasn't a pro dad all the time.
Right. I try not to reflect too much, to be honest with you, because I don't always like what I see in the rearview mirror.
Yeah.
I worked a lot, and my family's always been a big part of the teams I've been on. But I've coached a lot of other people's kids more than and I tell my kids, I'm going to be a great grandpa. I promise I'm going to be a great grandpa. But, that balance, my wife has always been a part. She even when I was at Thomas More, they were always at the games. My kids were always in the gym, same way at Xavier. And so that helped, but you still miss a lot. You miss a lot, and there's a little bit of guilt that comes with that. But you have to be successful in this business we're in. So there's only so much time.
You got to earn a living.
You just try to do the best you can and be there when you can, and then work when you have to. But it just seems like wherever you're doing one, you should be doing the other, and it's tough if you're going to be a coach. Was there any time that you just said, hey, you know what, at whatever o'clock on Sunday afternoon, I'm done, I'm going home, or Friday afternoon or whatever, and you just said, it's going to be, because, I got into that with, when you're in the NFL, it's a grind, like when you're at Xavier, or even when I was in college, it's a grind. And if you're not the head coach, you are under the structure of whatever the head coach puts in place. Right. And so you got to be able to, within that structure, you got to carve out your own structure. But when you are the head coach, I've been that as well, you can create those opportunities right. for all the assistants, and then they can do whatever they want with that time. But I'm just, just for the benefit of everybody that's listening and leaning in here,
what's your thoughts on all that?
Well, it's certainly easier when you're a head coach when you manage a schedule. You make up a schedule and you can, if you got to go watch a little league baseball game, you can make that work out. I tried very hard. The Big East was tough because we played on Sundays, but I usually like to have Sundays off. I like our players to have Sundays off. I like to attend Mass with my family and have that be a regroup day until Sunday night when everything kind of starts over again. But it's hard. You just got you pick your spots and you try to be as organized. But you mentioned your staff and things like that. I try to have a schedule and I try to stick with it because you want to be fair to them too. You want your players and your assistants to know when their free time is and when they can do stuff with their friends and family too. So all that was run. So you try to be really organized. And then out of season, you do as much as you can with your family. Once you're in season, as you guys know, it's very difficult.
Yeah. And you know what else makes it difficult? These things right here.
Yeah.
Because even when you're at home, you can be working.
Yeah.
And you're calling a recruit or you're texting a recruit or whatever. So that steals some of your family time as well. And speaking of these things, let me ask you this. We've been asking other coaches, how do you deal with your team in these? Because this is a huge, huge pull for young kids. It's a superior distraction to young teams. How are you guys handling this at your team and what you're doing with it?
When you mean handle, what do you mean?
Well, like, do you tell them, hey, we're not on our phones at this time, or you keep your phone in your locker, or maybe you don't. I don't know. Just kind of, how do you guys, what's your philosophy on those?
When I was
you tell your team.
When I was at Thomas More and Xavier as a head coach, I wanted them as they were walking to campus, start thinking about our team. And then once they walked in the building, they weren't to be on their phone once they went into the door.
Got it.
Once they went into our locker room, we had a box, and that's where everybody's phone went. Should be off in that box because nothing mattered out in the outside world for the next 2.5 hours. And that's how we handle that. On the road, we didn't have our phones at dinner. And at night, depending on how things were going, if the night before a game or something like that, we may actually take their phones and hold those in an assistant coach's room or something like that. And that I kind of led up on that a little bit. The more I felt our players were, the more conscientious they were, the more responsible they were, the more we let them hang on to those a little bit more. But there may be times on a bus ride I might make them put away their phones and have some conversation about where we were, whether if it's a historic or a site that we could talk about.
Right.
We did a lot of stuff like that too. But it just if they were responsible, we let them have them usually.
Okay.
I'll tell you one thing they did that was really nice too, Steve. At the camp at Xavier, Brian had all of his assistant coaches break up into groups with all of the younger girls and talk to them about social media and the dangers of and getting into that. And I thought that was a kind of a really important thing that they did there, just to explain, even if the girl was just a high school athlete, they got to know sort of the ins and outs of that and what can happen at the next level when you get involved in that too deeply and all that. And that was a good thing, I think, that they did there, that nobody else at any other camp that we had been to prior had taken the time to do. So
nice.
Well, this is kind of the new age of social media, just so oppressive now, and our kids are just overly exposed to all this now. So the way we coach is you got to be very conscientious and intentional about the impact of social media and them taking pictures of each other, themselves, and all the different nonsense that goes on. And, so we really appreciate that. Really appreciate your insights. Where you mentioned your faith, and how does that play into your coaching and what you're doing with your girls and all that? And it's probably easier at Xavier than it is at where you're at now. I don't know, maybe not. Just kind of share a little bit about that.
Well, Thomas More and Xavier were both Catholic schools, which fit me perfectly. That's I converted to Catholicism in 2000, and so that was right in my wheelhouse. So, and I was a little concerned about going to a public school, but Eastern Illinois is really has a strong faith in that community and that school. There's a lot of organizations and churches, and the students are really involved in that. So you can feel that right away. Even to the first time I was there, you could sense that. I don't know if you can pray as much with your team and things like that. At that school, we haven't, and Coach Balan, who I work for, has a very strong faith, very Christian, and which is awesome. And our staff is the same way. So we all fit like that. I was a little concerned going to a public school, but that hasn't been a factor up at Eastern Illinois.
That's good. That's good, because it can be challenging for some of us when we are at a Christian school and you're not. I coached at Notre Dame, and then I haven't coached at Notre Dame, and it's challenging, and some public schools are less challenging than others. So, but we're just in a culture in America where that's the challenge, and I feel it's important to have a spiritual aspect of a team's culture.
Yeah.
And I just think that then you develop the whole athlete, as opposed to 2/3 of the athlete or 7/8 of the athlete, or however you want to look at it. But you get to develop, because then the truth is really the truth, in my opinion. And you said you were kind of conflicted a little bit. I don't think you were conflicted at all. I think you did the right thing all the way through as far as recruiting and all that. But it's a challenging thing. And I love what Nick Saban says down in Alabama. He says it to his players, but it's also us as coaches. We have to fight human nature every day.
Yeah.
And it's human nature as the structure of our program. Maybe we want to just sit on the couch for another 15 minutes. But you know what? Human nature, get up and go to work, or, whatever the case may be. So really appreciate having you on, Brian. I don't want to take up all your time, but it's been our pleasure to have you on, and I know whoever listens to this will get some real great things from it. And
thanks.
Good luck in the future, and thanks again for coming on the show, and look forward to following you now that I know you a little bit.
All right, great. Well, I appreciate you guys having me, and hopefully we got a couple nuggets out on that.
Thanks, Brian. We're all in common. We all have 4 kids. We're all bald. And we all play an instrument.
Glasses.
We all play an instrument.
Yeah, I'm a better listener than I'm a player, but I'll bang on them once in a while.
There you go.
That's a good time. All right. Make it a great day, guys.
Bye, guys.